Okay, hello everyone. Today's topic is unlocking the AI spectrum, understanding the various flavors of AI for business. So, what I want to do is talk about the different types of AI that is now available for business and the roles they play and how they intersect and how businesses can really leverage them. And I am excited to say that I'm joined today by Davor Bonaci, who is the Chief Technology Officer and Executive Vice President at DataStax. Welcome, Davor.
Thank you, Bernard, for having me today.
It's such a pleasure. Maybe you can give us a brief overview of your background and what you do today for DataStax.
Uh, yeah, would love to. Obviously, as you said earlier, I'm a CTO at DataStax, and I'm basically running our AI business at DataStax. I joined a couple months ago at the beginning of the year when DataStax acquired Cascada, which was the company I started and was the CEO during its entire existence.
Mm.
It was kind of a super exciting to start a company and see it through an exit. And then, in a past life, I was at Google building similar distributed systems in the early days of Google Cloud.
Excellent. So at the moment, we're hearing a lot about ChatGTP and generative AI, but there are other types of AI that can make a big impact for organizations. From your perspective, what are those different flavors of AI?
Interesting question. So obviously everybody's talking about generative AI these days, right? It's a innovation that hit the nerve, I think, with the industry over the last 6 or 9 months. Right, it's a technology that can generate text and video and music and images and any sort of type of content based on the model trained on the content already available in the world, right? And we figured out that it can be really useful in making us more productive. Of
Hmm.
course, this is super interesting innovation, and everybody is looking at it. Obviously, even before generative AI, people were doing things like predictive AI, right? Like predicting the future, predicting what's going to happen, predicting, predicting weather, right? These are all models that can predict the future based on what has happened in the past in similar situations, right? Like uh, that helps businesses enable and anticipate customer behavior, forecast market demands, right? Optimize operations or any other type of data driven decisions, right? People have been doing predictive AI for a long time, right? Like simple recommendation engines have been part of e commerce companies for a long time,
Hmm.
right? It's more around predicting the future based on kind of data that we have from the past. Beyond generative and predictive, which seems to be kind of two categories that people tend to, right? This is not an really a survey and a breakdown of everything, but it feels like those are kind of the two types of AI that people are talking about, right? We've been doing predictive for a while. We've been doing generative, in the last 6 to 9 months. Everybody seems to be talking about it.
Very good. So if we look at those two types of AIs, the predictive and the generative, how do they differ, especially in terms of their potential for business applications and the benefits to businesses? And maybe you can share with us some practical real world examples of how those two types of AIs are being used.
Yeah, obviously, right? So generative AI can generate content of all kinds, and people are exploring its use cases everywhere, right? It's a relatively novel thing, and people are finding different use cases across the industry in terms of generating relevant outputs, summarizing things, right? Like ChatGPT being an example of generative AI model that can follow instructions given in a prompt, right? And I think we are just scratching the surface of what generative AI can do, right? Like really automate generation of content of any kind. But people often talk about text first, right? Generating content based on other information and instructions we give it. I think the applications are vast, right? Like most of jobs are about producing content, producing text, right? It can clearly automate and enable people to be more productive, whatever content they are producing, be it text, be it computer code, be it something else. Predictive AI is a little bit more easier to understand. It's just predicting what's going to happen, right? Predicting or forecasting something into the future, right? And then we can take a data-driven decision about that in the future, right? And that depends again what kind of business we are talking about, but like clearly, every business has customers. Predicting customer behavior is valuable to any business, right? Like just any business. All right. Then you have predicting demand, pricing, optimizing operations, right? Like all of these things matter to most businesses, right? And they are more kind of um acting based on what you think is going to happen, just like humans behave differently if they know it's going to be a sunny day versus a stormy day, right? They plan their day differently to get to live a to live a good life, right? In similar ways, businesses that can predict what their stakeholders will do at different times can also optimize how they run their business, right? And that's what predictive AI can do for them.
Very good. Do you have any examples that you feel really illustrate how companies can use those two technologies? So have you seen anything in practice, maybe among your customers, maybe in the world as a whole, where you think actually this really illustrates the power of generative AI, how this company is using it, and this illustrates some of the power of predictive AI and how this organization is using it?
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into specifics of what and naming companies what they do, but like in terms of generative AI, I have personally seen cases where people are generating paragraphs of text to show on in certain websites to kind of improve the search experience among among many outputs that can be given, right? So think of it as you are searching for something online. Perhaps you're buying something, right? Like giving a specific summary of the specific item based on your intent, right? Like what you are purchasing and for what purpose you are purchasing it for, right? Being able to generate intent specific summary of some product. That's like very simple use case that people are clearly experimenting with, and I've seen it today, right? Like it's much easier to find in a list of items when you have a good summary, right? Like that is generated for you for the intent you are making the search, right? Like that's a very powerful thing that improves user experience a lot, right? Like these small things are examples that like everybody can do today. And then there are like these bigger things like GitHub Copilot that helps you write code, right? Like there are many of these productivity tools that can make you obviously more productive. There are plenty of known examples today. On the
Very good.
predictive AI, it's kind of examples are also relatively widely known, right? Like predicting what the customer will do when they are going to do it, right? And then obviously taking action to facilitate that is super interesting to customers, right? Predicting churn, predicting purchase, predicting interest, in session personalization, right? These are all examples where we can improve user experience to drive an outcome.
And do you see that those two types of AI will stay in their own swim lane, or do you think that they will intersect with each other? And if so, how could this happen? Do you have any examples of how they could intersect and work together?
Yeah, totally. I'm pretty sure that there will be a significant overlap between them, right? Like in some sense, um, generative AI may be kind of wider or is wider than predictive AI, but it's more about technical trade-offs between them rather than anything else, right? So clearly, generative AI has the ability to generate predictions, token by token, and predict the future that way. However, right, like it's the flavor of model that requires different type of you know different size of data, different cost that drive the kind of technical trade-offs here. Obviously, generative AI requires more data. It tends to be more expensive, and predictive AI tends to require more, human in the loop often, right? Like more feature engineering, more understanding of data. But it's simpler. It's simpler to understand. It's cheaper to operate. It requires less data, right? So these are kind of technical trade-offs, and companies will find its spot, I think, across these technical trade-offs.
Very good. Yeah, a really cool example that I have recently seen was where a hotel company basically used generative AI and predictive AI and tried to combine them.
Mhm.
So one of the examples I saw was that they had one image of the hotel, like a photograph, and then they wanted to run a, let's say, a Halloween or Christmas special, and they simply used generative AI that simply typed in, please give me a picture of this hotel with Christmas lights on or with Halloween decorations. And
Yep.
it created this pretty amazing picture. And
Yep.
then it was using predictive AI to say, okay, these are the various customer segments and these are the demographics and these are, and then basically again you use then generative AI to feed some of this information in to then customize the email messages to
Yeah.
your predictive demographic. And that for me was pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. The only thing that I would say here, when you're doing predictive AI, you should not use demographics. You should use behavioral ML, right? Like to figure out, based on the behavior, what the hotel search may be for, right? Whether it's like vacation or it's a business trip, right? Like you kind of try to figure out intent in the purchase. Um, rather than you are this gender or this age, so you must be doing that, right? Like 70-year-old people don't go on a business trip, right? Or right, like that's a little bit iffy. But if we do behavioral ML to predict the reason for the trip and so on, that's kind of pretty good. On the other hand, like the generating pictures that are not real and showing it to people can also be a little bit tricky. But again, people are definitely exploring these technologies in the way exactly you described.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what do you see are some of the key challenges then that businesses might have to face when navigating these various flavors of AI, the generative and the predictive, and how can they overcome some of these challenges and make informed choices?
Absolutely, right. So there are challenges from several angles. If I start with, I guess, generative AI, I think at a high level, the number one question everybody tends to have is how this is going to change my business, right? Like is this reshuffling, who are the leaders, who are not the leaders? Does this challenge the business model itself? Right, and will there be new entrants into the space that are able to do this better than others? Right? Like I often think leaders across businesses tend to ask themselves this question, and I've personally seen pretty much every CIO out there is tasked today to figure out what generative AI means for them, right? And there are no, clear cut answers. I've talked to plenty of people and seen plenty of patterns, but it's everybody's exploring and making sure that this does not disrupt their business, or that they get ahead with this kind of reshuffling in what's generally possible. When you go down from kind of executives to maybe somebody like data architects, they tend to ask themselves, how is generative AI changing data architecture, right? Like, what is needed to support it, right? How do I do it with real-time data, right? Like, perhaps technically, calling models and showing the results of the models is not that difficult. But what is difficult with generative AI tends to be, the agent architecture and driving real-time data into the model so that the model gives contextually correct and up-to-date information that is useful, right? So we all know ChatGPT was trained, or GPT-4 was trained with a little bit stale data, right? And again, like, when people are interacting with it, they expect real-time data, real-time information, right? Like, information from the news, or information, if you are building, let's say, a chatbot, right? Like, the chatbot knows your interactions with the system, that has happened recently. So people are kind of asking themselves, how do I drive real-time data or my proprietary data to these models to produce relevant outputs, right? That's kind of what data architects, tend to ask themselves, today. And obviously then, beyond, executive concerns and architectural concerns, then there is, like, ethical or security implications of it, obviously, as well. These are more on the, tech policy side of things, right? Like, on what data we can train, what data is not safe to train, who has the right to use the data, is this violation of this law or that law, right? We are still, figuring those things out, as well.
Very good. So, what recommendations would you have for businesses deciding on where to get started or how to build an AI strategy?
So, right, so this feels like a CIO level question, right? Like, AI business like strategy and so on. And so I think the number one thing to start is around, I think, business goals that AI can help achieve, right? This is very business specific. In most cases, I think AI has the ability to um, automate and optimize business and make it easier to produce results, right? Like, and it's kind of, okay, what our business is doing and where we are generating value, and will AI change the game here, right? Like, the most, like, this feels like an existential question that people should ask themselves. And everything that looks like, knowledge work at a computer that produces some content as the output feels like something that AI has the ability to uh, to significantly change over the coming years, right? And this is not new, right? Like, businesses have been disrupted by these ways for a long time. I don't know, travel industry had travel agents everywhere, 10 years or some number of years ago. I don't know, is it 10, but some number of years ago, nobody booked their own tickets. Everybody went to a travel agent, right? And obviously, now nobody goes to a travel agent, right? Everything is completely automated. You click a few clicks and you get what you want, right? And so this is another step in that direction, where anybody who produces, let's say, text, right, is like lawyers, right? Like, can we, generate legal documents in a different way, rather than, um, asking a lawyer for a contract of this or that, right? Like, and there are many businesses of that nature, right, that are going to be, significantly disrupted, in at least in some ways, with this technology. And so I think we start asking, like, what does it mean for us, right? Like, where we are generating, content, and how does that change the game, right? And it's obviously, industry specific. And then it comes down to data I have, right? Like today, I think everybody understands that data is super important, what kind of proprietary data they have and what's possible with the data, right? And that will, typically mean asking ourselves in what way our data is unique that can drive better models, that can drive better data products, um, for the market. And so once you understand kind of the impact to the business and impact to data you have, then you ask yourself, like, how do I implement things? And that typically starts with, resources, right? Like, do you have everything you need to develop, deploy, maintain, data systems, AI systems, right? This is like a people and process problem rather than technology problem, right? Like, so that's kind of the next level, kind of more tactical operational things. And then you finally go into the questions of culture, right? Like, are we ready? Like, how do we talk about it? How do we prepare the organization and culture, right? Around people inside the organization for the change to happen, right? And so
Very
there are kind of levels in which I think an executive needs to think about how the industry is going to change, what is their unique position, right? What unique data they have, and then from that, I think kind of high level strategy comes into play. Then you start asking yourself operational questions
mm,
around people, process, and culture, and things like that.
very good, very solid advice that I would completely agree with. So, what is DataStax doing to help customers on their AI journeys?
Hmm. Great question. DataStax is the real-time AI company, right? So in some sense, we help our customers with data infrastructure to power AI, to power real-time AI, right? Like it's really about building smart, high-growth applications, or maybe smart, high-growth agents, AI agents that plug into AI systems, right? So obviously, up until this point, people have been doing more with predictive AI, and we've been helping our customers and our open source users with that for a long time, right? Obviously, now everybody's taking the next step, obviously blurring the line with generative AI, right? And so we have what we think is the right technical architecture and the right components to put into real-time AI, real-time AI solutions, right? And so we can help, the community think about the real-time AI architecture and what components to put where, what are the right components to build real-time AI with.
Very good. As this is looking into the future, what about the future are you most worried about?
Worried about? I mean, I think that um, you know AI is going to change things. It's going to change industries. It's going to change jobs, right? And obviously, it's going to reshuffle the cards, I guess, for a lot of people, right? And that reshuffling has a chance to disrupt our world in positive and negative ways, right? Like, and I hope it will be more positive than negative, but we that's something we have to clearly manage, right? Like when change happens, oftentimes there is some level of discord that needs to be figured out in the world before we get to a more steady state, right? Change is hard, and it has disruption possibility for around lots of things. I hope that we will avoid the worst of them.
And what about the future are you most excited about?
I mean, uh, I'm excited about the gains in productivity, right? Like we are all humans who try to make an impact, and productivity is clearly important in our ability to generate value, right? Like in some sense, computers and data and AI, right? It's all about the productivity of individuals that we have been driving over the last, you know, half a century or more, right? That enabled this quality of life that we have, today, right? Like everything, like if you think about how, humans lived 100 years ago, we live, 100 times better than people lived 100 years ago. And that came pretty much from productivity gains that humans have enjoyed over the last, century. And, this is a big step in that direction, which is likely um, you know going to improve the economic output, and from the economic output will likely drive significant advances in generally what's possible, and quality of life, and another thing that will happen over next decades, as long as we don't mess it up as a society.
Very good. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. That was a fascinating discussion. For anyone who ever wants to rewatch or re-listen to this, simply head to my podcast or my YouTube channel. Thank you very much, Davor.
Thank you, Bernard.